I believe we stand at a very, very critical juncture in orthopedics where, in my opinion, molecular techniques for isolation of the infective organism will become the standard. So implant-related infections are very, very difficult to diagnose. And the reason for that, which most people are familiar, is because the organisms causing the infection usually clutter together on the surface of the implant and form what's called a biofilm. They're not floating around for us to be able to pick them up. To be able to isolate the infective organism from biofilm, you need special techniques. Unfortunately, in orthopedics and in implant-related infections that we see, like total knee, total hip replacement, about 30%, perhaps even sometimes up to 50% of these infections are negative for an infective organism, so-called culture negative. We have done extensive amount of research, multi-center studies. We've collected data on over 3,000 patients with periprosthetic joint infection and the revision cases that are aseptic failures. Next generation sequencing can isolate the infective organism when the culture is negative. And it does so in about 80–90% of culture negative cases. And sometimes it gives you multiple organisms, which I would treat. I have a patient of mine that was transferred to my care from another institution. This gentleman had a terrible rip-roaring infection, 2 prior operations on him in that particular institution, with the culture being kept for 21 days, had been negative. He came here, we did the same thing, took all the implants out, put him through the operation, and sure enough, culture negative in the initial phase. Next generation sequencing picked up Mycobacterium abscessus. Interesting, a mycobacterium. And sure enough, culture 21 days later confirms that that was the source of infection. Mycobacterium is not an organism that we usually treat. So not having that information in your hand for 21 days, well, that could compromise the care of that patient. So that's critical information. And interestingly, what we have found is that if you don't treat those multiple organisms, in the case of an infected patient, some of those organisms can come back and cause later failure. Everybody says, yeah, sure, you told me what the organism is, but I don't know what they're susceptible to. Is it methicillin sensitive? Is it methicillin resistant? Is it vancomycin resistant enterococcus? Is it not? So they tell me that, if you don't do culture, you won't have that information. But interestingly, next generation sequencing of my MicroGen-Dx will tell you exactly what resistant genes there are there. In fact, that has become one of the most interesting appeals of MicroGen-Dx technology in other fields. Now you have the sophisticated molecular technique to isolate the DNA, and you would know what organisms are causing the infection in that particular patient, and you can act faster and earlier. For once in my career, over the last 20 to 25 years, I am so excited about the technology that's going to transform the future for us.